This is a great question. Look, and there's a growing movement. I'd have to say right now it's probably the biggest one. I mean, we go through these cycles in special education. So, back when my daughter was a lot younger, it was sort of autism, and it's still a huge, but it's sort of matured with regards to that movement and not really having a shock and awe effect like it did, even 6-7 years ago. Then we moved into bullying being the thing, and everybody's kid was being bullied, a few years ago. That was the thing. If you go back, and I'm talking about these natural, organic movements, that triggered by social media, if you want to call it that. But it was that. But in the last couple years, it's been dyslexia, and I think that I think for a couple reasons. Number one, I think that there's sort of a growing understanding or a growing acknowledgement, and I think that it's it always happens in the private and sort of the I don't want to say academia, because half of academia is wrong and gave us this crap that we're now trying to undo with regards to how we teach reading. And I think that that's also part of the reason that we're seeing a spike in reading disabilities or reading deficits, is that I think we've always had the number of kids that are differentiated in their thinking and learning. I mean, we're humans. We all are like that and unique in how they learn. All right. So, but I think that as of late, and I sort of pegged No Child Left Behind as that marker for when things sort of went haywire and we started adopting some craziness. Now, because of that, I think that it always takes a good decade, maybe a little bit more, for everybody to sort of, come to the realization that, hey, we're doing this wrong. And if you look at private schools, and you also look at the research side of academia, mainly in colleges, not the education colleges, because they tend to perpetuate the nonsense going on in public education, because they're the ones cranking out our future educators. But it's more the research side of academia where we come to this, this acknowledgement with regards to child development and how the brain works and the best way to teach and train children. And then there becomes this division and this fight between this side of academia that quite frankly, it's more about wanting to protect their power and perch on top of the dung pile, as opposed to acknowledging that, hey, we're doing it the wrong way. Now, it doesn't mean that change doesn't happen. Change does happen. The only problem is that when you have artificial obstructions, like people that are in a power play because they reached the top of their particular dung pile, it just stifles it. It slows it down considerably. So it's far easier to implement these changes inside private schools, homeschool, private businesses that provide these type of remedial services in the right way to teach our children. And then through the sheer inertia of the public school sort of losing out on all of these kids because everybody's just going to abandon the system, that's finally where you see change. So as such, that's where the stuff occurs. And I think that we're at that sort of that. I'm saying the tectonic plates are grinding, and I think we're going to have a shift. Now, who's going to win out? That's always the mystery. But I'm optimistic because of what I'm seeing out of the dyslexia movement, or the reading differences movement. Because like I said, I think it's easy to latch on to a word like dyslexia, but really, I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about differentiated learning. We're talking about the fact that, a one-size-fits-all reading program that might be peer-reviewed and scientifically based for, 50% of your students, that's fine for those 50%, but what are we going to do about the other 50%? And that means that within that 50%, you might have 10% that are receptive to this reading approach, 10% effective to this one, 15, that's beneficial. We're not looking at education as an individual construct, and we need to start, especially when it comes to reading and math. And the rest of it, sort of filters in. But, so I saw that you're up in the north aspect of the Midwest, extreme north aspect of the Midwest. And every state is sort of scrambling right now to address this problem with regards to reading, and trying to shift away from how we've been doing it. Because like I said, I think there's an acknowledgement that, hey, we've been doing this wrong. And then instead of admitting that they did it wrong and then flip, they're trying to sort of intermix and meld it together and confuse it to try to save face and then stay on top of their dung pile. So what can you do? Well, the biggest things that you can do is be on pages like this so that you raise your level of knowledge with regards to the law. But some of the biggest aspects is that you need to go out and get the right kind of training. And we've considered doing this. We've actually considered partnering with a good reading interventionist that I'm friends with, and then set up a workshop to train parents in these reading intervention approaches. And at that point, that parent, with understanding the reading intervention approach, can then replicate it with your own child, and potentially within your own community, and potentially within your circle. Let's say you create a PTA style parent group of, let's say, reading, something like that. You continue to move that forward. I wouldn't, yes, I would go and advocate with your Board of Education, talk to them about what kind of stupid program that they're going to buy, that typically is Uncle Festus, who's related to Aunt B, who knows Tony, whose friend owns some reading business. And that's where all of these things come down, guys. I mean, the amount of money being spent in education on friends of friends and relatives, the nepotism, and then the big, huge companies out there. The biggest one, out of England, Pearson, that's gobbled up everything and has a monopoly when it comes to forcing our schools to buy their particular product. I mean, they're making billions off of our education system, to where we don't even have a lot of choice. And it doesn't mean that their product is good or effective. It just means that they have the money to buy off our politicians to force our schools to buy their crap. All right? That's the state of public education. We need to free our schools and not mandate and force them to have to buy, to follow certain standards that will then force them to buy certain products owned by education corporations that happen to buy lobbyists and politicians. So I always say, yes, work with your Board of Education to try to get what works, but at the same time, you also need to just take care of your own. Raise your level of knowledge. Create friendships with a reading interventionist and collaboration with these people, and solve your own problems. Because we're going to have to start doing that in the future. I don't know where it was that we've all become too reliant on government to solve our problems. We shouldn't be doing that. We have each other. We know professionals out there that are passionate about what they do, that don't work for government. There's a lot of people in government that they leave government, like I'm talking teachers that leave, and then they start their own businesses to serve the kids because they have a passion for teaching. They have a passion for psychometry. They have a passion for teaching. Nothing said that it has to happen here and that the government has to come in and save us. Let's solve our own problems. It's great that they're there, but if you're waiting for them to change, I've already explained why this stuff is crawling like molasses, like a sloth. You want to wait for that? I mean, your kid's going to keep getting older every year. I mean, you can. Or you can buckle down, think outside the box, work together to solve these problems ourselves.